On October 28, 1943, the American Navy carried out one of the most chilling experiments in world history. This enigma, which researchers still struggle to understand, involved many phenomena that we now think of as science fiction, like time travel, teleportation, and invisibility. But what truly took place in Philadelphia on that day? Some investigators believe that something even more horrifying occurred than we realize. So, in today's video, let's explore what happened during the American military's Philadelphia experiment. In 1943, just 2 years after America joined World War II, a lot of powerful attack ships from the American Navy were taken down by German submarines and sea mines. Because of this, the American Navy started looking for ways to tackle these attacks. A few months later, on October 28, 1943, the USS Eldridge, a gunship from the Navy, arrived at the naval base in Philadelphia, USA. But this ship was hiding a huge mystery in our history. It was the newest ship built by the American Navy at that time and was packed with big generators. The Eldridge was also used for secret missions in many places around the world. This ship played a key role in winning the famous Battle of the Atlantic. Reports say that the ship had so many generators because they created a magnetic field around it. This magnetic field helped the ship travel without being spotted by German sea mines and radar systems. On October 28, 1943, they created a magnetic field, and the whole crew started testing it. That afternoon, while other planes were flying around and many inspectors were watching, they turned on the generator and activated their system. But what happened next was totally unexpected. According to witnesses, the ship was suddenly shrouded in a dark green fog. After a while, when the fog cleared, the Eldridge was not just invisible to German radars, but also to regular people. In other words, the Eldridge vanished. This mystery got even more puzzling when the missing ship showed up in Norfolk, Virginia, about 250 miles away. But there was an even bigger twist. The ship appeared in Virginia 10 minutes before it disappeared from Philadelphia, and then 20 minutes later. If you look at it from the spot where the ship vanished in Philadelphia, it seems to reappear there 10 minutes later because of this time difference. However, when the ship came back, the crew had all sorts of burns, some limbs were missing, and some soldiers were fused with the iron of the ship. This meant their bodies had merged with the ship's hull at a particle level. So, when they were rescued, it was impossible to separate the iron from their bodies and save the crew. Many lives were lost that day. Some of the crew who managed to survive the ordeal ended up with mental health issues, while others simply vanished without a trace. So, what really happened there? As news about this investigation traveled around the globe, many folks started to believe it. We're talking about a time when war strategies were uncovered through some pretty unusual experiments. Americans thought that some mysterious force was behind this war. So, during that time, people were open to believing in wild ideas like time travel and teleportation. You might remember the famous Roswell alien spacecraft incident that happened not too long ago. Back then, the world was more inclined to believe in strange, mysterious happenings than it is today. Because of this, the tale of the missing ship quickly spread across America, and people bought into it. But is this story true? While the USS Eldridge was indeed a real ship that existed back then, when they checked the ship's log, it turned out it wasn't in Philadelphia or Virginia on October 28, 1943. Instead, it was in New York. But that doesn't mean the Philadelphia incident is a total fabrication. There's written proof and eyewitness accounts that the American government did conduct an experiment in Philadelphia on that date. According to this evidence, the American Navy was working on experiments in the 1940s to create ships that would be invisible. Several of these experiments took place at the Philadelphia Naval Base. However, these experiments weren't aimed at making the ship disappear in the way we often hear about. As I mentioned earlier, the goal was to make the ship invisible to German radar and sea mines. At that time, the German army used electromagnetic fields on their ships to trigger bombs in the water. When bombs got close to ships with this electromagnetic field, they would somehow explode automatically. So, the American Navy, having learned about this, tried to prevent the bombs from picking up signals using various methods. They called this degaussing. The first method of degaussing involved attaching electromagnetic coils to the ship. But adding these devices was quite costly and tricky. Instead, the Navy opted for a simpler approach called wiping. This involved running large electrical cables from both sides of the ship, powered by 2,000 amperes of electricity. This electricity altered the ship's electromagnetic field, making it so the bombs wouldn't detect the ship's presence. However, this method only worked over short distances. As the ship traveled further away, the Earth's magnetic field would start to take over again. This meant that the effectiveness of the degaussing method would fade, and they'd have to start the process all over again, kind of like changing the oil in a car. Up until 1943, the United States and other navies were using various tactics to deal with the bombs dropped by the Germans. But the Americans learned from Germany about different ways to dodge sea mines, so Germany sought new methods to detonate their bombs. Researchers suggest that the response to these new German techniques was what happened in Philadelphia in 1943. However, based on the information available, no breakthroughs regarding time travel came from those tests. Yet, according to one scientist, a very different story has been shared. Okay, let's dive into the intriguing tale of the Philadelphia experiment. This story kicks off in 1955 when an investigator named Morris K. Jessup stumbled upon a mysterious letter. Morris Jessup was an astronomer and the author of a well-known book about UFOs called The Case for the UFO. In this book, he shared all sorts of fascinating details about strange alien crafts and their uses. It was quite a popular and controversial read back then, especially since it came from a respected scientist in astronomy. He included some intriguing information about aliens and their vehicles, which caught the attention of a group in American society that believed in UFOs and alien stories. With all this buzz, people who believed in aliens started sending Morris letters about the crafts they had spotted, odd happenings, and their own theories. Among these letters was one from a man named Carlos Allende. In his letter, he talked about some popular theories of the time regarding mysterious events and secret tests being carried out by the American government. He also mentioned an incident that took place on October 28, 1943, involving the USS Eldridge, which was near the ship he was on. Allende claimed he saw this ship vanish in a green mist. He told Morris that the ship had left Virginia 10 minutes earlier, and then returned to Philadelphia 10 minutes later. The story about the crew that I mentioned at the start of this video, where they were supposedly fused with the ship's hull, was all part of these letters. He even said he understood the scientific method used to test this ship. According to him, the American Navy scientists applied the unified field theory discovered by Albert Einstein, which combines electromagnetism and gravity into one field. So, is Allende's story true? Well, there's a little twist. The name Allende is actually a fake. His real name is Carl Allen. He was a huge fan of aliens, alien tales, and Morris's books. He wrote over 50 letters to Morris, but one thing he mentioned has now been confirmed. Allen was actually working at the Philadelphia Naval Base at that time. But if the Eldridge wasn't there, what was Allen talking about? The things he wrote in his letters are pretty questionable. To put it simply, it seems a bit silly. According to Allen, or rather as he wrote, most of the crew members didn't survive after this investigation. He also claimed that after this incident, one officer from the ship vanished suddenly, and the other officers gradually disappeared too. He mentioned that the fire on the ship lasted for 18 days. Even though he found it hard to believe what he was saying, Morris decided to give Allen a chance to share his story. So he wrote a letter to Allen, saying that if Allen could provide some solid evidence for his story, he would look into it. But in Allen's next letter, instead of evidence, he wrote some really strange things. So Morris decided to drop the story. However, a year later, 2 officers from the Office of Naval Research, or ONR, a newly formed naval research agency, came to visit Morris at his home. This ONR was the agency that carried out scientific and secret research related to the Navy. He realized it wasn't a good sign for them to find Morris. Someone had sent Morris's book, The Case of the UFO, to this agency. Along with that book, there was a commentary by 3 people referred to as gypsies. In this commentary, the gypsies had written about the Philadelphia experiment and the involvement of aliens in it. But as soon as Morris spotted this comment, he realized it was written in Allen's handwriting. He had sent the letter using different kinds of inks, almost as if 3 people had written it. One of those 3 even claimed to be an alien. Later on, Allen confessed that he was the one who wrote the letter. However, many people were puzzled as to why a big organization like ONR would take such a silly letter seriously. Investigators mentioned that they get a lot of letters like that. But if this comment wasn't connected to the Philadelphia investigation, why did ONR treat it with such importance? This is where our story takes another twist. I told you, the American military has even admitted that during the year we're talking about, the American Navy did an invisibility test, which means they were experimenting with moving without being seen. This suggests that what Allen was saying was tied to a real event. So Allen spent the next few years trying to prove that his story was true. Meanwhile, Morris was dealing with a different challenge. After this incident, his journey as a writer took a nosedive. His first book had been a huge hit, and he started working on a second one. But that book didn't come close to the popularity he had hoped for. Then, when he wrote, the third book, it flopped so badly that the publishers he had canceled their contracts with him. So, Morris was willing to do anything to regain the fame he had lost. He also admitted that there was some truth in Allen's story. So, based on the information Allen shared with him, he went on a quest to gather details about the Philadelphia investigation, working tirelessly for years to collect every little piece of information related to the incident. Then, in 1958, he asked his friend Ivan Anderson to keep this information safe. Morris told him that if anything happened to him, he should share this information with the public. On April 19, 1959, Morris Jessup called his friend Manson Valentine. He said he had found a significant piece of evidence that could back up his investigation, but he couldn't share it over the phone. He needed to meet in person. They agreed to meet the next day, but Morris never showed up. On April 20th, 1959, Morris was discovered dead in his car. The cause of death was carbon monoxide poisoning. The police ruled it a suicide. However, his autopsy report was never made public. The death of Morris K. Jessup added to the mystery of the Philadelphia investigation. So, did someone take Morris out of the picture because he was getting too close to solving the mystery? His close friends mentioned that he was living a very stressful life leading up to his death. Morris's books weren't selling well. His wife had left him. Plus, he had also been in a car accident. Because of all these events, some investigators believed that the story of his suicide might be true. But the fact that he died on the same day he claimed to have found a crucial piece of evidence has raised many eyebrows. Okay. So, what do you think about this story? Are there really mysteries out there in the world? What are the big institutions and governments trying to keep from us? What are mysteries like the Philadelphia Inquiry trying to reveal? People naturally want to uncover the truth behind these kinds of mysteries or conspiracy theories all the time. But here's the thing. Most of the time, someone is working to keep these unknowns hidden from us. Just like Carl Allen, Maurice Jessup, and others in the story we talked about today, maybe we too could go a little wild, searching for the truth in these dark mysteries. Or it could be something even bigger. Thanks a bunch for sticking around and watching the video all the way to the end. We're super excited to share more mysterious videos like this one in the future. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out, and if you picked up something cool from this video, give it a thumbs up. Catch you later. Chew.